the inner delta, interior delta. He attacked the Bulgarian part of the Danube, and this was former Bulgarian because in this moment they are the Ottoman Empire.
Yes.
And this is the real beginning of the war between the Turkish Empire and Vladislaus. It's in with the aim to conquer the Danube and to obtain the control of all the Danube. And then he was attacked by the Turks, and he was obliged to fight.
Vlad tells the king in a profound statement,
"Because by no means do we want to leave unfinished that which we began, but we will follow this through to the end. We will not flee before their savagery, but by all Christians we will use all our means to fight them. And God forbid it ends badly for us and our country is lost. Your Majesty will not benefit from this because it will be a loss for all Christianity."
There is a small note attached to the bottom of this letter. It was written by the grammatical Radu Farma. This letter states how many were killed in each place along the Danube that the Turks occupied. The total was 23,864 Turks and Bulgarians. There were others who were killed, including women and children who were there living with the Turks and were killed in the fires. This letter was sent to the King of Hungary. Yet later the same information, almost verbatim, would be used in many pamphlets and manuscripts that would be spread about the prince. So how does this information in the letter to the king find its way into manuscript written about Vlad?
Different manuscripts with this letter. One was the old manuscript, in which the letter was conserved, and in which Nikolai Yorga first found this in his, I think in Vienna. And another letter, another manuscript was found in Wolfenbüttel library. Wolfenbüttel library is a little principality in Central Germany.
The information about Vlad's raids against the Sultan reached the Pope. The Transylvanian towns were celebrating Vlad's triumphs, and an English pilgrim named William of Way on his journey through the island of Rhodes began ringing bells and singing the praise to Vlad Dracula and his victories over the Turks. The Genoese, who were next in line to be attacked by the Ottoman Empire, thanked Voivode Vlad for saving them. Vlad's letter sent to the Hungarian king was in February, but by May, Vlad still had no word from the Hungarian king, and the Sultan was on his way to face battle with the Wallachian prince.
Well, in preparation for what would be his attack launched against the Ottoman Empire, Vlad did some very strategically clever things. He decided to burn or destroy many of the entry points, realizing that most likely the Turkish army would come across the river, come across the Danube. He checked out all the possible points of entry and had them destroyed. He also destroyed any crops or whatnot that would be on the trail, knowing full well that sort of a scorched earth policy, as we refer to it in military terms, would work to his benefit and leave the Turks at a disadvantage.
George Castriota, or Skanderbeg as he was nicknamed, was also a captive of the Sultan Murad. He revolted against the Sultan and used the scorched earth policies, also using the tactics of burning the fields and poisoning the water supplies so the enemy's invading army would not have food or water. Vlad Dracula would use these same practices.
Also, he practiced what we would call guerrilla warfare, surprise attacks on Turkish camps and so on, hoping to weaken the resolve of the enemy. Now, basically, he had to do these things, and they were very clever devices, because one-on-one in a battle, he didn't have a chance. I mean, there's no way if the Turkish forces met the Wallachian forces in the open field that he would win. They were just too badly outnumbered. But these little things for the year before, leading up, he figured might weaken the resolve and might make the situation a little more favorable to his side. And to some extent, it did help.
On June 14, 1462, the Venetian ambassador Petrus de Tomasis wrote to the Doge of Venice stating that Matthias was making preparations in Transylvania to help the Wallachian prince. But as many documents prove, in June of 1462, Matthias still had not left his castle in Buda.
They were quite close. Now in 1462, strangely, Stephen switches his alliances, and he wanted to attack the town of Kilia, which was located in Wallachia at the time. Stephen wanted to help the Turks overrun this town. And so here you had Vlad fighting against the Turks in his main battle, and having to fight this side battle as well. So it ended up splitting Vlad's forces and probably prevented him from getting the type of victory that maybe he would have gotten otherwise. He would have had a better chance of succeeding had Stephen not taken this action. I think that's fair to say. And I think it showed Vlad one more time, of many during his reign, that he was basically on his own, and that he could not always depend on other people, be it the Hungarian king or the Pope's crusades or Stephen, his cousin, that he had to do this himself, or else it wasn't going to get done at all.
Shortly after this, on June 17, 1462, Vlad made a daring night attack on the Sultan's camp. Dressed as Turks, Vlad's army entered the Sultan's camp just after nightfall and got all the way to the center of the Turks' camp looking for the Sultan's tent. Vlad's army spread quickly in all directions, killing as many Turks as they could. They punctured holes in the army's water supplies, knowing that a massive army would not get far without water. When the horns blew, another commander was to come in from behind with another contingent of Wallachian soldiers. But he became frightened to enter the camp and retreated with many Wallachians. Vlad and some of his army were left inside the camp. The Turks began killing other Turks because they weren't sure who was the enemy. This battle continued until dawn of the next day. Vlad's army fled to the mountains. It was claimed in Turkish chronicles that this raid scared the Sultan so badly he tried to flee, but his visors reprimanded him and brought him back against his will.
To help compensate for the disadvantage that he had in battle, the fact that he was badly outnumbered by Turkish soldiers, Vlad also employed what we would term as psychological warfare. If you can scare people enough that they won't fight you, that's a lot better than having to fight them and lose soldiers and so on. So sometimes he tried that, and he tried to maybe even build up this reputation of his cruelty, so it would be a deterrent to an enemy from coming in and attacking him. The most famous example of it was what happened when the Ottoman soldiers were marching towards Târgoviște, which was Vlad's capital city. And Vlad had a number of soldiers impaled, of Turkish soldiers impaled, and put along the side of the main road leading into the city, so that when the Sultan and his army approached, they were met by this forest of the impaled, as it's been referred to in history. And it's quoted, and this is in Turkish chronicles, it's quoted that the Sultan looked at this and said, paraphrasing him, he said something like, well, I don't know if I can deal with this. I mean, somebody who does this is a fierce warrior indeed, so maybe we should retreat. And he did, for a while, retreat. Now, he did come back later at other locations, but for that moment, the city was spared his invasion. So it was just the thought of it, the psychological threat that this posed, that prevented a battle, which was a rather interesting military technique, and other leaders, of course, in battle leaders have used it in other ways.
After many skirmishes with the Turks, the Sultan left Wallachia in the hands of Dracula's brother Radu. Documents place Sultan Mehmed back in Adrianople by July 11, 1462. What is interesting to note is that Matthias wrote a letter from Pressburg on July 2, 1462, and stated that he was leaving shortly to set out against the Turks in order to aid the Wallachian prince Dracula. But Matthias didn't leave Buda until July 15th. He took a snail's pace and reached Turda on September 17th and was in Sibiu on September 26th. He did not leave Sibiu until late October and was not in Brasov until the first week of November. He did not send a messenger stating his actions, and he did not send an army from Transylvania to assist Vlad. Instead, he brought along a mercenary named Jan Jiskra to help arrest Vlad Dracula. Vlad's brother Radu who had taken the side of the Turks, was on the throne of Wallachia by August 15, 1462.
First of all, King Matthias admired him because Vlad was really effective to protect Hungary from the Turkish, or the southern borders of Transylvania from the Turkish. He did a really great job. He had a lot less soldiers than the Turkish did, and despite this fact, he did a really good job by defeating them psychologically. King Matthias says one of the main fears of the king was getting attacked by the Turkish, as it happened. Later on, King Matthias made an agreement with his brother that he's going to capture Vlad, and on the other hand, in the meantime, his brother can get his hands on the family heritage.
We know that the Hungarian king and the Sultan had made an agreement, but at that time, this agreement could not be made out in the open. Matthias was given funds to fight the Turks, not make peace with them. Jean Duglos, a Polish chronicler of the time, wrote, "It seemed as if Matthias was in league with the Turks." In the commentaries of Pope Pius II, we find an explanation. Matthias Corvinus had sent many ambassadors to Pope Pius II asking for money and assistance in the war against the Turks. Many had already donated funds to the Hungarian king as early as 1459. A Hungarian ambassador named Polycarp had just been released the previous year from the captivity of the Sultan and stated to the Pope that the Sultan was offering peace if the king would relinquish Wallachia and Bosnia. The Cardinal of Gran paid money, and the Venetians also sent 20,000 to the King of Hungary to aid him in a crusade against the Turks. Vlad had been waging a war for months with his only Wallachian army that was now nearly depleted. There were many letters and rumors stating that Matthias was on his way, but he did not show up in Brasov until November. There, on the outskirts of Brasov, King Matthias Corvinus and Vlad Dracula met. But after weeks of talk between the Hungarian king and the prince, Matthias Corvinus sent out a contingent of mercenaries, headed by Jean Justra, to capture and arrest the fearless warrior. The Hungarian king's army did not fight one battle against the Turks, but arrested Dracula, took him to Buda, and imprisoned him for 10 years. Only after the death of Vlad Dracula in 1476, we find the chronicles of Antonio Bonfini, who was documenting a history of Hungary and stated, after the arrest of Vlad Dracula, many began asking questions, the first of which was Pope Pius II. The Pope sent out Nicolo, the Bishop of Madrusa, to question the Hungarian king. In the commentaries of Pius II, we find Nicolo was given a secret mission that he could carry out if he chose to do so. There were many protests from the Hungarian king during questioning by Madrusa, and it just so happened that at this time the Hungarian king received 3 letters he supposedly intercepted.
Now the Rothel letters are a very interesting phenomenon. The claim was that they were written by Vlad. There were 3 of them, 3 letters. And Matthias Corvinus had them in his possession. And he claimed that they had been written by Vlad. And all 3 pointed clearly to the fact that Vlad had decided to switch his allegiance from Corvinus to the Ottomans. Now, if that were true, I mean, that would show Vlad as a bit of a traitor to what he had fought for years. So the question arises, did Vlad write the letters? Now, a very strong argument has been made that he didn't. And the reasons that are often used are that the letters are inconsistent grammatically and in phrasing with other letters that we know that Vlad wrote. So there seems to be quite a bit of linguistic evidence to pretty well determine that Vlad didn't write the letters.
Konstantin Rezachevesh stated, "We know that Matthias Corvinus sullied and tarnished Vlad's reputation and credibility for a reason, to explain why he had not helped Vlad fight the Sultan in 1462, for which purpose he had received money from most Catholic states in Europe." Matthias Corvinus knew the problems between his Transylvanian cities and their hostile attitude towards the Prince of Wallachia. In documents the king wrote to his own principalities, he stated he would not help them if they went against Vlad Dracula and asked them to make peace with Vlad Dracula.
Now that raises the question, who did? Well, the theory is that they were written by a cleric at the Black Church in Brasov, and that it was done in collusion with Matthias Corvinus. That Matthias Corvinus wanted to establish a fact, which probably wasn't a fact, that Vlad had turned traitor. Now, why would he do this? Well, he had a couple of reasons. One, he wanted to put Radu on the throne, Vlad's brother. He had thrown his support behind Radu, and Radu had the support of the Ottomans, and so if he could put Radu on the throne, that would, if he could discredit Vlad, he would have a better opportunity to put Radu on the throne, which would be interesting, because it would show that Corvinus would be the traitor rather than Vlad, but that's a whole other issue. He also wanted to justify his arrest of Vlad. In 1462, Corvinus had Vlad arrested and brought to Hungary, where he was living under house arrest for many years. Now, he had to justify this arrest, particularly to the Pope, because the Pope sent a legate to Buda to find out why Corvinus had Vlad arrested. Because Vlad was a great fighter against the Turks and was a great crusader. And it wasn't only the Pope, it was some other Western leaders as well, who wanted to know why this person who'd been fighting valiantly against the Turks had all of a sudden been arrested. So Corvinus had these forged letters, and we're pretty convinced they were forgeries, to say, well, here's your evidence, Mr. Pope, you know, here's what Vlad was up to. And it would have been quite convincing coming from the King of Hungary. Now, Corvinus had another reason. He was interested in some money that Vlad had been party to, money that was being collected by the Pope to help finance this new crusade that was supposed to happen around that time. And Matthias felt that if Vlad were discredited, he would have access to this money and could use it to fund a purchase that he desperately wanted. And that was St. Stephen.
At this precise time in history, the courageous efforts of Vladislaus Dracula were being tarnished in a propagandist campaign that would change the name Dracula forever. This smear campaign that began after Vlad's arrest would continue until the present day.
Many people believe and write and state that Vlad was the inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula, and in that sense that the two are very closely connected. However, anyone who does any research on this subject will quickly find that that is not the case. Now, to begin with, Bram Stoker in 1890 began writing a novel that would become Dracula. We know a lot about the early writings, the notes and his ideas and so on, because he kept his notes. They have survived to the present time. In fact, just a couple of years ago, I helped in the publication of those notes, so anybody can follow the trail if they wish to do so. The notes show that Stoker had already started writing a vampire novel before he came across the name Dracula. He even had a name for his vampire. He was going to call him Count Vampire. Not very original, but that was his plan. In the summer of 1890,